Dion win.
Hi everyone, welcome back, me for the very first time, and welcome to my series So You Want to Get Into. This is a series dedicated to the directors of world cinema and indie cinema that you may or may not know about, and the best entry points into their films. And on this channel so far, we've looked at the works of Simon Lang, Claire Denis, Kelly Reichardt, we've looked at Sean Sono, we've looked at Hong Sang-soo, many fascinating filmmakers, and this month I've decided to look at the work of Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And Kurosawa has been one of these directors that I think does get the attention that they deserve, but also because of the vast filmographies, it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint where to go or where to start with them. And the way that this is going to go is that I'm going to talk to you about my first ever experience with the filmmaker, then I'm going to talk about the style, the subtext, and a bit about their filmography, and then I will give you 3 recommendations. The first one will be the masterpiece, according to Letterboxd right now. The second will be my personal favourite, and the third choice will be the all-rounder, the film that kind of embellishes everything about the filmmaker. So enough introducing, let's get talking. My first experience with Kiyoshi Kurosawa was actually Pulse from 2001. I actually watched it when I was in university in like the mid-2000s when that terrible remake from America came out. And I actually went then to watch the original. And this is why I found it interesting, because like this period of J-horror, we've got your auditions and your Ringus. It's kind of that time where this kind of Japanese film was kind of prominent and a lot of people are really delving deeper into it. But when I watched Pulse, I thought to myself, it was a very well crafted and suspenseful film. And I just found it to be so mysterious. And I think, especially in the early days of the internet, this is kind of one of those films that I would put up there with Olivier Assayas's Demon Lover, because it kind of gives you that eerie sense of everything in the internet may sound perfect and handy, but there's a darker side to it. And I really like this technological element to it. But I loved how Kurosawa split this tale into 2. And in this kind of decade, it just wasn't that normal to kind of like have 2 separate stories that kind of interconnected. But when you watch Pulse, it kind of works and it makes sense, because what Kurosawa always does is he leaves clues, he leaves kind of little breadcrumb trails for you to kind of connect things together. And I think that's what Kurosawa is so good at. You have to kind of pay attention to the details. And there's no loud noises, no cheap jump scares. It's kind of one of those really kind of subtly haunting kind of J-horrors that anybody can love. And it just allowed the horror to brood so nicely. And after I watched Pulse, unfortunately, I didn't really go back into Kurosawa for quite a few years. But Pulse always stuck in the back of my mind because I knew that he was a director that kind of grabbed my attention because of this, and, well, you cannot go wrong with any Kiyoshi Kurosawa films. Now to the style and subtext of Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Everybody will say that his contribution to horror is very important and kind of what he's most well known for, but there is so much to his dramas and other films that people do forget about this, and I think you can put your creepies and pulses and cures on a high pedestal, and by all means, yes, do that, but kind of go backwards as well. Look at films like Charisma, look at Bare Illusions, look at Seance, look at films like Before We Vanish, To the Ends of the World, to Wife of a Spy. They're all very thrilling films that have a very interesting kind of story to share. And he's an academic, he's a critic, he's an artist, and he's heavily influenced by American cinema, which is kind of interesting because we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. But his first ever film came out in 1983 and is called Kanagawa Pervert Wars. And this was actually a comedy, very erotic film. A lot of people will say it's softcore porn. It's a 60-minute film, which a lot of people have kind of not seen, but some of us have seen it. And I think even in this earlier time, what is kind of the key thing to understand with that film is that characterization was really important to him. And when you watch that film, for a first film to kind of get characters in the way that he did, really kind of helped him kind of develop what he made. And then in 1985, this one kind of caught me by surprise because I've only watched it recently, but it's called Excitement of the Do Re Mi Fa Girl. And it's a comedy musical, which I was really dumbfounded to find out because I didn't know that he made a musical. And it just shows you at the beginning of his career, he wasn't all about these suspenseful long shots and desolate areas and things like this. There's a lot of fun to them, and that's what you kind of want to see with a filmmaker, is that how he can adapt. But I think this is kind of this early period where things started to change, because by 1992, 93, he was actually given a scholarship by the Sundance Institute and went to study film in America. And this is the time where he started working on his masterpiece, that is Cure. And I think this American kind of influence that he's had is kind of important for understanding who he is. And I think Tobe Hooper is one of those directors that he admires and loves so much. But I think the two most important filmmakers to Kurosawa have always been Tarkovsky and Kubrick. And their versatility and the way that they've adapted kind of into various genres shine through Kurosawa's work, because he's adapted his style to any kind of story that he needed. And to kind of, not to say that he's on the level of Kubrick and Tarkovsky, but he is up there with some of the most interesting filmmakers that have adapted to different genres. As Cure came out in 1997, it actually didn't get much of a wider release until the early 2000s in the West, and it kind of had a name for itself, but not many people had known what it was. And I think once the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray came out for it, I think more people actually got to see it, and they were like, holy shit, this film is amazing. And this is the time, I think, where Kurosawa went up a notch. Even though I don't think he's ever emulated Cure to kind of the impact that it had. You had films like License to Live, Charisma, you had Barren Illusions, you had Seance, Pulse came out in this time, Bright Future. These are all very interesting films. And what I really love about this kind of time period is that he looks at the wider picture. While these films are kind of put into genres or classified into various things, his kind of observations of kind of desolation, decay, industrial kind of settings are always really at the front of his work, because he looks at angles of Tokyo and the world that we don't consider to be picturesque, and the kind of fundamentals of what drama is about is kind of lingering always within the films. And every time he kind of does a long shot, there's a purpose to it, I think. And again, as I mentioned, there's always these kind of clues and interesting kind of tidbits that have been stitched into this narrative that kind of evoke, especially at the end. I love the endings of Kurosawa's films, because you kind of know that there's something going to change or there's something going to happen. And he finds fear within everyday issues, and he uses that fear then to enhance kind of this horrifying side of what life is. And he builds really unique, dramatic family dynamics because of it. His writing is very crucial to any of his films, and building very strong characters is how he's managed to do it. One actor in particular has been in a lot of films from Kurosawa is Koji Yakusho, and I think it's really important to understand how he's kind of transcended in any of the performances that he's been in. In all of the films that I've seen Yakusho in, I think he's a different person. You don't always think, oh, it's just him again in another Kurosawa film. There's just so much more to it. And I think also because of this kind of connection, you see this kind of heavy influence of Ozu and Hitchcock within his films, because I think the suspenseful and thrilling side of Hitchcock is really kind of well emulated in Kurosawa. And I don't think Kurosawa kind of imitates. I think Kurosawa kind of uses the Hitchcock kind of structure and builds on it. Unlike somebody like De Palma, who just kind of rips off Hitchcock in so many ways. Apologies for that. And also with Ozu, I think that's kind of the influence that he's had from him, is that heavy sense of characterization and creating kind of very fleshed out stories and good arcs. And I think this kind of culmination of using these kind of classical directors has kind of influenced him a lot more than you actually might think. And when you look at his films, you always seem to think, well, actually, it does feel like this, but you can sense also it's a Kurosawa film. Every time you watch a Kurosawa film, the stamp is there. You know it's a Kurosawa because of his kind of connection to detail. Once we get to the mid-2000s, I think this is where Kurosawa kind of changed his style, and we see films like Tokyo Sonata, Seventh Code Journey to the Shore, Creepy, Before We Vanish, To the Ends of the Earth, and his most latest film, Wife of a Spy. These films are a lot more dramatic and not as kind of unhingedly scary, except for Creepy. Creepy is kind of this kind of reconnection with what he's so well known for, but I think now he's a bit more interested in kind of building more. And I think To the Ends of the Earth is a film that not a lot of people talk about, but it is one of these films that I truly loved. And I really enjoyed the idea of kind of looking at tourists and how they explore another country. I loved that film completely. But I think, as I've reviewed last year, Wife of the Spy wasn't exactly the film I wanted it to be, but again, it's just another film that Kurosawa has created that is actually quite interesting, even though it doesn't really gel with me all the time. And this is the thing about Kurosawa. His work may not always work for you, but there is a uniqueness and a fresh element to all of his films. And I don't think he has made a bad film. I don't think he's made a film under 3 stars. 3 out of 5. Definitely not. And they're all solid entries into a filmography that is versatile, well connected, well made, and well established. And it really just kind of puts him up on the pantheon of some of the best working Japanese directors in the world. And he's even at 66 years old now, he's still working, he's still teaching at university. His passion for film is always there. And that sense of kind of loving Western cinema has kind of transcended so well into a lot of his films. Now then, to my recommendations. The first one is The Masterpiece, and this is the highest rated film according to Letterboxd right now, and that is Cure from 1997. It's very, very difficult to kind of not say that Cure is his masterpiece, even though I do think there is a stronger film than that, but we'll get to that in a bit. But Cure is kind of up there with these kind of thriller films that I truly love. I think when I look at Fincher's Zodiac, this is kind of the level pairing I put it up with, along with Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder. I think it's a very fascinating, thrilling film that requires so much patience. And looking at the finer details, as we've gone through the style and subtext of Kurosawa, there is so much to unpack in each scene. It really builds into something so fascinating, and it's so rich and rewarding. I love how patiently he allows the story to kind of unfold. It's very scary in such a quiet way, and it builds such an absorbing film that is very stylish within its flair. And the long takes in this film are some of the best that you'll ever see in a film. I think it's just one of these moments where you just look at a film and you're just like, I would love to make a film like this. And I think this is the thing. When you have somebody like Kurosawa who has been so committed to cinema and is a servant to cinema, and the amount of research and reading and watching he has made, these kind of films can be created, and Cure is that film. It is one of the finest films that you'll ever see. And as you have listened through this, I've not discussed the plot once, because you should just go into it blind. Don't know a thing. Just watch it and just get ready to be tantalized and rejuvenated with film and your passion for cinema. Now, to my personal favourite and my personal masterpiece of the director, that is Tokyo Sonata from 2008. I actually watched this film about 3-4 years ago, and I just thought to myself, holy shit, this is one of the best kind of like family dramas I've ever watched. And I love this kind of side to Kurosawa because he kind of explores a bit more about tradition and heritage and how it's kind of dwindling away. And I really love this kind of subgenre of the drama, because as he kind of does it, he builds a wider kind of exploration of what identity is and who you are as a person, and how kind of the family structure isn't as normal as it was maybe in the 1950s, where the man rules the roost and all this. Opinions change, culture changes, people change, and I really love the way that he kind of explores this kind of fundamental. And again, there's so many twists and turns. It's so menacing and interesting, and I love this ending, and the Debussy music just elevates it even more. It's such a classical kind of film. It's like, it's kind of Orson-Wellesian in many ways, but also the Kurosawa stamp is just so evident and clear in it. It's just one of those films that I could watch over and over and over again, and I have done that. It's classical but modern, and one of the best Japanese films I've ever seen. Now then, to the all-rounder, and this is the film that kind of combines all the elements of the filmmaker in one, and I think the most evident one, and I think his most accessible film, I think, is Creepy from 2016, because it's very kind of familiar to the usual Kurosawa tropes. It's very vintage Kurosawa, but he uses kind of the modern dramatizations that he has been making and blends it all together. And I think it worked so well. It's a really thrilling and suspenseful film that kind of leaves an impression with you. And even though it's only from 2016, I think it's kind of one of these really solid films that Japan had actually produced at this point. And it just eases its way in, and it becomes harder and harsher, but the technicalities of it, these nice long takes, the beautiful photography, the stillness of the story, the characters are very well built, the narrative etches through so well. There's so much about Creepy that is to admire and to love, and I think it's one of the best films for you to kind of get into Kurosawa even more. Right then, that is the end of the video, and I hope you found it helpful. Kiyoshi Kurosawa is just one of these filmmakers that may not always be accessible, because some of his kind of earlier films or kind of 2000s-ish, they don't have the best restorations or anything like that, but if you can get into them, invest. There's quite a few Kurosawa films on Masters of Cinema, including Creepy, including Cure, you have Pulse on Arrow Video, so you can see quite a few of his films, and just give them a go. I think he's just a fascinating filmmaker. If you have actually watched a lot of Kurosawa films, please let me know in the comment section below what your favourite is. And if you know a way of me to watch some of his earlier films, I would truly appreciate it. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I will be back very soon. Bye-bye. Actually, sorry, before we leave, I just want to say a massive thank you to anybody that has supported this channel since the beginning. I've almost reached 1,000 subscribers, which is something I never thought would happen on the channel, because it's a bit too niche for people, and some people have no clue what the hell I'm talking about half the time, so that's totally fine. But I just want to say thank you to anybody that has joined this ride at any given point. Thank you very much to the new subscribers that have joined this channel, but I just wanted to let you know, during September, there will be no video content because of my job. I'm a marketing manager for a film festival. The film festival is happening in September, and I've just got so much work I need to do, and I need to focus on that completely. So very sorry for kind of a little hiatus, but I'll be back at the back end of the month with maybe one review and the next video of So You Want to Get Into. And then obviously in October, we are going to London Film Festival for 2 weeks. That's a lot going on there as well, so plenty of stuff to kind of make up for it. But thank you so much to anybody that has been part of this. You are really, really appreciated, and I will see you at the back end of the month.